Give me that!
Bastard!
Flash!
I really love this movie, but the thing that impressed me the most was the opening music. And every time I hear it, it makes me smile. And then, right after that scream, the film explodes, open like a stage with all the lights turned up. From the shiny, toy-like armor and the exaggerated theatrical movements to the distinctly 1950s futuristic aesthetic, and even a Queen soundtrack that turns every scene into a performance. But the more I revisit it, the more I realize this. The true madness of Flash Gordon isn't on the screen, it's behind it. Did you know that one of the film's most iconic scenes was shot without a script or proper staging? That the movie was once banned in several countries for being accused of occult themes? Or that at one point the producers seriously discussed an idea that sounds like a joke, sending James Bond into space to face Ming today? We're opening the backstage doors to uncover 20 of the strangest, most chaotic, and most unbelievable secrets of Flash Gordon. 20. The lead actor was stripped of his own voice.
Wake up! Dale, wake! We're okay! It's me, Flash. Remember? We're on the ground.
Back home?
I don't think so.
You probably never questioned anything when Flash Gordon appears on screen. Blonde hair, solid build, the smile of a classic American hero. He looks exactly like an icon designed to be printed on a VHS cover. And that's precisely why Sam J. Jones was cast. He had the physique, the jawline, and the aura of a fresh-faced leading man. But very quickly behind the scenes, things began to fall out of sync as tensions with producer Dino De Laurentiis surfaced almost immediately. Language barriers, an exhausting shooting schedule, and creative clashes where no one was willing to back down. Then, during a break in production, things spiraled out of control. Jones got into a physical altercation off-set and ended up hospitalized. When he returned, filming continued. The cameras kept rolling, but the relationship between the lead actor and the producer had quietly fractured. Jones refused to do ADR, the crucial post-production voice recording sessions. He also skipped the promotional tour and simply walked away. The studio had no choice but to bring in another actor to dub the role. Nearly all of Flash's dialogue in the final cut is not Sam J. Jones's voice. The audience never knew. His name remained in the credits. His face stayed on screen. Only one thing was no longer his own voice. And did you ever notice something off about Flash Gordon's voice? 19. Mike Hodges and the silent firing.
So we start making the film, and it's wonderful sort of comedic sort of lightness to it all. And the crew, when they see the rushes in the morning, would laugh.
For a long time, I always felt that Flash Gordon had moments that were strangely off-ironic cold, almost smirking at itself. That was Mike Hodges' fingerprint. He joined the project relatively late, but once the cameras rolled, Hodges found his rhythm. He didn't want to make a loud, straightforward comic book movie. His version leaned towards satire, dry humour, and a carefully controlled absurdity. But that vision soon collided head-on with Dino De Laurentiis, who wanted everything bigger, brighter, and completely unrestrained. At first, it was just arguments. Then, little by little, Hodges' authority was stripped away. Scenes were restructured, editing decisions were made without him. And when post-production began, it happened quietly. Hodges was no longer invited into the editing room. He vanished from the process of finishing the film. The Flash Gordon that reached theatres still carries fragments of Hodges' DNA, a few satirical beats, a few odd pauses. But as a whole, it became something else reassembled according to the producer's will. Years later, Hodges spoke about the film with a mix of pride and distance. Because even though his name is still on it, Flash Gordon no longer belonged to him. It was the movie he made, but not the movie he was allowed to finish. 18. The rejection that gave birth to Star Wars. before the green glow of lightsabers, before the rebels faced the Empire. George Lucas had one very simple dream to make Flash Gordon. Like many American kids who grew up watching classic sci-fi serials, Lucas loved that world, adventurous, naive, and full of colour. He believed he could bring Flash Gordon back in a more modern form. Lucas approached the rights holders with his idea and was rejected almost instantly without negotiation. But that rejection didn't kill the dream. It forced him onto a different path. If he couldn't borrow Flash Gordon, he would create his own universe with unknown heroes, a totalitarian empire, and swords made of light. The rest is history called Star Wars. Ironically, it was the massive success of Star Wars that made Hollywood realize space sci-fi still had a future. And that very realization pushed Dino De Laurentiis to finally greenlight Flash Gordon in 1980. If Flash Gordon hadn't once closed its doors to George Lucas' Star Wars, might never have existed. And sometimes, those seemingly small rejections are exactly what end up reshaping the entire cinematic sky forever. 17. When Flash Gordon almost had a different face.
Your play.
No. Yours.
Are you sure these are the rules?
There are movies where you look at the cast and think it couldn't possibly be anyone else. But with Flash Gordon, that outcome was the result of a casting roulette wheel that nearly flew off the rails. Before Sam J. Jones was chosen, Flash almost belonged to someone else. Kurt Russell was approached first, but he turned it down, finding the script too ridiculous. Dennis Hopper was considered next, but a Hopper version was simply too strange, too unpredictable. Then came Arnold Schwarzenegger, the perfect physique, instant star power, but a heavy accent that made it hard for anyone to understand what he was saying. One option after another fell away, until Dino De Laurentiis spotted a face on the dating game Sam J. Jones. He wasn't a star and he wasn't a big name. But he had exactly what Dino needed, a classic heroic look empty enough for audiences to project onto. It was a gamble, and sometimes that very wild card is what helps a film find the face that truly belongs to its world. 16. The film's most famous scene was never staged. If you ask people what they remember most about Flash Gordon, many will point to the same moment Flash grabbing a football and turning a royal execution into a backyard brawl. It's the moment the film declares itself, we are not serious and we're proud of it. What few people know is that this scene was barely prepared at all. No choreography, no staging, no stunt rehearsal. The cast was given just one instruction, go for it. And they did for real. Fruit was thrown everywhere. Guards were knocked over. Every movement was improvised. No one knew if the cameras could keep up. No one knew how long the scene would last. No one was even sure it would be usable. In the middle of the chaos, Brian Blessed as Prince Voltan began shouting tactics as if he were commanding a real sports team. No one told him to do it. He simply felt it was right, and the cameras kept rolling. A scene that on paper should have been scrapped the very same day became the most remembered image of the entire film. And you, aside from this moment, is there another scene that stuck with you just as strongly? 15. When an actor became the special effects and wrecked the soundstage. From the very beginning, Brian Blessed didn't play Prince Voltan. He lived him, and living it meant everything had to be bigger, louder, more explosive. In fight scenes, Blessed didn't wait for sound effects to be added in post-production. He made them himself with his mouth. He produced every sound imaginable, laser blasts, impacts, explosions. The sound department begged him to stop. He didn't. To him, this wasn't disruption. It was the character's energy. The consequences were very real. Many scenes had to be reshot just to get clean audio. Production time stretched. The budget swelled. But no one could deny this. Whenever Brian Blessed appeared, he behaved as if he truly were a space prince and the entire universe had to hear him. Audiences may not remember the technical details or how the lights were set, but they remember the shouting. They remember the excess. They remember the feeling that someone on screen wasn't afraid of looking ridiculous. And perhaps in a film like Flash Gordon, that is exactly the most honest thing an actor could do. 14. Max von Sydow and the gamble called Ming the Merciless.
After the earthquakes and tidal waves, they won't be quite the human beings you remember. They'll be more tractable, easier for you to rule. In the name of Ming.
If you grew up watching classic films in the evening, you probably saw The Seventh Seal or The Exorcist and associated them with a very specific face, stern, somber, and full of depth. That face was Max von Sydow, a symbol of European art cinema carrying the weight of faith, death, and inner torment onto the screen. That's why the shock came when he accepted the role of Ming the Merciless. Not a psychological villain, but an exaggerated, theatrical, camp-filled evil figure, wicked as if he had stepped straight out of a painting. Von Sydow understood the risk better than anyone. He feared the role might undo decades of carefully built reputation. It's said he hated the costumes, found the film's tone bizarre, and often wondered whether the entire production was sliding into parody. And then the film was released, and the opposite happened. Audiences embraced Ming. Critics called him the film's clearest standout. Excess became a feature. The theatricality became magnetic. Ming was no longer a joke. He was an icon. That gamble with his reputation didn't diminish von Sydow. It made him memorable in a different way. Sometimes, for a role to endure, you have to step outside your comfort zone and accept being seen differently. When no one knew what they were shooting, and that's why the film lived. You may have felt something strange about this movie too. It doesn't feel calculated. Everything unfolds as if it's slipping out of someone's control, yet doing so gracefully. Lines arrive unexpectedly. Reactions feel slightly offbeat. Scenes connect in ways you're not sure really fit, and yet you stay hooked. The reason is almost unbelievable in its simplicity. No one on set truly knew what was going to happen next. The Flash Gordon script was constantly being rewritten. At first, the cast and crew tried to keep up, but soon pages were delivered to the set just minutes before shooting, leaving no time to rehearse or understand the characters. So they stopped reading. They improvised. They faked their way through takes. Some later admitted they had no idea what the movie was even about at the time. Each scene became a small gamble, say something, do something, and hope it survives the edit. That chaos didn't stay behind the scenes. It spilled straight onto the screen. And strangely enough, that very sense of being out of control became Flash Gordon's defining identity. 12. When James Bond was invited into space. You might never have imagined something that sounds like a joke yet was completely real in the world of Flash Gordon, a crossover with James Bond. The pitch was documented quite clearly. Bond goes to space. Familiar gadgets function in a zero-gravity environment. Ming faces off against MI6, a kind of Cold War in space where two British icons collide on the same screen. This wasn't just a rumour, there were memos, treatments, even early sketches. The idea never made it past the planning stage. Maybe it was too absurd. Maybe no one believed audiences would accept it. But the fact that it almost happened says everything about the spirit of Flash Gordon. This is a film born from impulsive decisions where the line between seriousness and joke is always blurred. Can you imagine what it would have been like if that joke had actually become reality? 11. The duct tape miracle, when costumes were falling apart but the show had to go on.
I'm sure we can reason with them.
You want to bet on it?
In our memories, Flash Gordon feels like a visual feast, gleaming metal armor, massive wings, towering helmets. On screen, everything looks overwhelming. But up close, the illusion began to crack. The costumes were never meant to survive long, hot, chaotic shooting days like these. Armor split open, wings tore, belts popped loose in the middle of a take. Zippers jammed, some helmets fell straight off actors' heads while the cameras were still rolling. In a normal production, someone would have yelled, "Cut." But on Flash Gordon, there was an unspoken rule: don't stop. If a zipper broke, the actor turned to hide it. If a helmet fell, it was picked up and folded into the action. Mistakes that should have been discarded were kept. And then the miracle happened in the editing room. Broken pieces were stitched together. The pace was pushed forward. Light and music covered every crack. What audiences saw wasn't duct tape, it was spectacle. Flash Gordon survived on a very cinematic truth. Sometimes a perfect appearance only needs to hold together just long enough for people to believe in it. 10. The near-fatal fall of a prince who refused to fake his flying. Brian Blessed was never the kind of actor who did things just to get through them. When he took on the role of Prince Voltan, a winged warrior with a thunderous voice, he set one simple rule: if the character flies, then I fly. So they hoisted him high on a cable rig in full heavy costume. The wings alone weighed nearly 18 kilograms. The harness cinched tightly around his chest. Every lift put his body under strain. Then the accident happened. Early in one take, the rig malfunctioned. The system failed. Blessed fell, no safety net, no padding. Just a few crew members standing below, and a moment that nearly became a tragedy. He survived. The entire set went silent. But strangely, Blessed didn't rage or place blame. He got up, adjusted the harness, fixed the wings, and kept filming. On screen, audiences see only a powerful warrior soaring through the air. They don't see the fear, the weight, or the brush with death. A hero created by someone willing to hang himself on the thinnest of threads. 9. When the set flooded and the cameras never stopped. There's something very characteristic about Flash Gordon. No matter what happened, the cameras had to keep rolling. And nothing proves that more clearly than a mid-production disaster caused by a plumbing failure. Water flooded onto the set, not a drip but a rush. Floors soaked through, backdrops were ruined, props absorbed water, costumes were destroyed, electrical equipment flickered and shorted. On most productions, this would have meant a full shutdown, but the crew decided to keep shooting. They shifted the cameras slightly, avoided the worst danger zones. And just like that, scenes were filmed under conditions no one ever wanted to relive. Incredibly, a scene shot on a flooded floor with damaged sets made it straight into the final cut. Audiences never noticed because the lighting, editing, rhythm and music did their job perfectly. And sometimes, refusing to stop is exactly why a film survives long enough to be remembered. 8. From Pink Floyd to Queen, 10 seconds that defined the soul of the film. When people talk about Flash Gordon, it's almost impossible to separate it from its music. But few know that Queen was not the original choice. The first name seriously discussed was Pink Floyd, a far more artsy and much darker option. Everything changed in a very dino way. He wasn't particularly interested and reportedly didn't even know who Pink Floyd were. Then someone played him a Queen track. Dino listened for exactly 10 seconds and said, "Get those Queen guys in here." The problem was that Queen were on tour at the time. They had only a few weeks to write and record the entire soundtrack, rushing sessions in hotel rooms and between shows. What they produced wasn't just background music, it became a hymn for the entire film. And then, cutting through all that grand sound, comes a very plain, almost casual line of dialogue. I remind you of Rule 17 of Ming's law. A perfect moment for a movie born entirely out of impulsive decisions. 7. The wedding scene that nearly got the film shut down.
Recite after me, Your Majesty. With this ring. Ring.
In theory, the wedding scene in Flash Gordon is just a familiar sci-fi trope. The villain's wedding, a coerced bride, the hero arriving at the last second. Everything is framed in camp and drenched in garish colour. But when censorship boards watched the scene, they didn't see camp. They saw danger. Ming the Merciless's threats toward Dale Arden felt too real. The cold delivery, the implied violence, the abuse of power. In 1980, those elements were enough to trigger red flags with censors in Ireland and Singapore. Some regions demanded heavy cuts. Others pushed for stricter classification. At one point, there were even threats of a complete ban. In the end, the film was approved, but just barely. It was the moment Flash Gordon crossed a thin line from playful camp into something that made authorities uneasy. 6. When the film was branded occult. In the West, Flash Gordon was seen as a carefree explosion of colour. But in parts of Asia, particularly Singapore and Malaysia, the film took on a very different face. The concern wasn't violence or language. What alarmed censors was the imagery repeating circular symbols, ritualistic patterns, sacrificial costumes, light and shadow ceremonies, and Ming's almost godlike authority. In a different cultural context, these elements stopped reading as camp and were interpreted as occultism. As a result, the film was banned outright in some places. Elsewhere, it was heavily cut, reclassified, and pulled from family theatres. A misunderstanding of tone, but one strong enough to turn Flash Gordon into one of sci-fi's strangest censorship cases. 5. A nod of pure instinct. There's a very Dino detail that once you know, it makes Flash Gordon feel inevitable. Dino De Laurentiis wasn't fluent in English, and that was no secret. But when the Flash Gordon project was pitched to him, what happened was incredibly simple. Dino nodded yes immediately. He didn't closely read the script, didn't analyse the tone, and didn't dissect the structure. What he responded to was imagery, colour scale, spectacle. To Dino, cinema was first and foremost about feeling, something that hits the eye before it reaches the mind. Every major decision casting style music came from instinct, and the irony is that this seemingly reckless approach produced Flash Gordon exactly as it was meant to be. A film not designed to be safe, but created through pure intuition. 4. When America turned away and Britain kept Flash alive. When Flash Gordon was released in the United States, the response was fairly cold. Critics were unsure how to react. Audiences went in expecting another Star Wars, only to be shocked by the camp, the colour, and the exaggerated theatricality. Box office returns disappointed. In America, Flash Gordon faded quickly, but across the Atlantic, the story took a different turn. In the UK, audiences embraced the absurdity. They loved the style, the deliberate excess, the Queen soundtrack. The film was aired again and again on television. Posters filled shop windows. Lines were memorised. The music was played at full volume. And over time, it was Britain that kept Flash Gordon alive, nurturing it into a cultural icon long after any marketing campaign had ended. 3. Gordon's alive, and even the Queen remembered.
But don't worry, Gordon's alive!
In 2020, Brian Blessed told a story that sounds almost like a legend. He claimed that Queen Elizabeth II once told him she loved Flash Gordon. Not just watched it, truly loved it. Especially the line, "Gordon's alive." According to Blessed, she would re-watch the film with her grandchildren during holidays. It's an anecdote passed along by word of mouth. Hard to believe at first. But with Flash Gordon, anything feels possible. A film once dismissed as ridiculous somehow echoed all the way into the palace. And perhaps that's the most beautiful proof of its strange endurance. With Flash Gordon, nothing is too outlandish, not even a camp line becoming a royal memory. 2. When the creator of Flash, Gordon turned away from Flash Gordon. Before Flash Gordon existed on screen, Flash had lived a long life on the page. And one of the people who helped shape that soul was Al Williamson. His artwork was elegant, dramatic, richly detailed, turning Flash Gordon into a mythic figure noble rather than comic. When the 1980 film was released, Williamson went to see it. His reaction was painfully cold. He didn't laugh, he didn't rage. He quietly stood up, left the theatre, and never looked back. To him, the film had missed the heart of Flash Gordon that he had drawn for decades. It's a familiar fracture in adaptation history between source material and spectacle. A sad reminder that not every legacy can be fully translated into the language of cinema. 1. The film that gave others permission to break the rules. When Flash Gordon was released, it wasn't immediately loved. But over time, it grew not through critical prestige but through influence. A quiet influence spreading to later generations of filmmakers. Edgar Wright has said, Flash Gordon taught him cinematic rhythm, that music and imagery can carry a story, even without dialogue. Taika Waititi has called the film bold, absurd, yet strangely sincere. And James Gunn saw in it a spark one that later ignited Guardians of the Galaxy. Flash Gordon didn't teach others how to make films correctly. It gave them permission to break the rules, and sometimes that's exactly what creates cinema that lasts. Flash Gordon was never born to be a legend. It lives in the memories of those who watched it on old TVs, in Queen songs that suddenly burst into the room in the line "Gordon's alive" that people never forget. And over time, it inspired those who dared to make films differently, to break rules, to go too far to trust their instincts. If Flash Gordon ever left a moment stuck in your mind, a scene, a line, or even just a melody, leave a comment and share your memory. And if you love strange, dark, nostalgic, behind-the-scenes stories like these, don't forget to like, subscribe and share to join the channel on the next cinematic journeys.